President Bashar al-Assad met the Secretary General of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Ahmad Jibril, and the delegation accompanying him. Talks dealt with the latest developments in the occupied Palestinian territories and the daily violations committed by the Israeli occupation forces. Particular focus with regard to these violations was placed on the continued constructing of new Israeli settlements in the West Bank to tighten siege on Jerusalem completely in preparation to Judaizing it. President al-Assad stressed that the Palestinian cause has always been and will remain the compass for the Syrian people, regardless of the severe pressures exercised on Syria to deviate it from this cause. Discussion also touched upon the situation in Syria. Jibril stressed that the front stands by Syria that has always supported the Palestinian people and the national resistance movements. The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry has expressed astonishment at the statements made by the UN Under-Secretary for Peacekeeping Operations, Hervé Ladsou, to news media in New York, in which he said the situation in Syria has reached a civil war. A statement by the ministry said Syria has always expected UN officials, especially Ladsou, to approach current events in Syria with objectivity, neutralism, and precision, particularly after the deployment of international observers in most Syrian governorates. The talk about civil war in Syria, the statement added, is not in harmony with the reality and contravenes the Syrian people's aspirations. The statement concluded that what is happening in Syria is a war against armed groups that have chosen terrorism as a means to reach their goals and conspire against the future of the Syrian people. Security has been restored to al-Haffeh in Latakia by the authorities after the area was cleared of the armed terrorist groups who attacked citizens and vandalized and burned public and private property. An official source said the authorities chased the fleeing terrorists in neighboring villages and clashed with them, killing some of them and detaining others. They also confiscated large quantities of sophisticated weapons that included missiles, sniping and automatic rifles, explosive devices, mortar guns, RPG launchers, and large quantities of ammunition. The source added that the clashes resulted in killing or wounding several members of the law enforcement troops. On the other hand, an official source at the Foreign and Expatriates Ministry called upon the UN observers to visit al-Haffeh city within the framework of their mission to verify what is taking place on ground. A team of UN observers visited Qatana in Damascus countryside and inspected the damage caused by the terrorist armed groups in the city. They also met the residents there. The observers then visited Khalid al-Saqqa Amini Hospital and listened to the injured people who briefed them about their suffering because of the armed terrorist groups. A team of observers also went to Barza neighborhood in Damascus and to Al-Assad suburb in Damascus countryside. An armed terrorist group abducted 7 civilians in al-Salamiyya area who were on a bus affiliated to Adra Company for transport. Armed men stopped the bus near Tel Ardiq while it was heading to al-Salamiyya. Another armed terrorist group targeted the Farmers Association in Jinan City at the Salamiyya area and stole a locomotive loaded with 20 tons of wheat. On the other hand, 9 explosive charges were seized and dismantled in a deserted house in Al-Shajara Souq in Hama. The devices weighed between 35 and 50 kilograms. In Idlib, an armed terrorist group abducted a bus carrying 24 passengers on Ariha-Saraqib highway heading from Latakia to Aleppo. A source in the governorate said the armed men used 2 cars provided with machine guns to force the bus to stop. The source added that a university student who happened to be passing by at the same time was injured. In Idlib countryside, engineering units dismantled 6 explosive devices planted by armed groups on Ariha-Saraqib highway, whose weights are estimated at 30 and 40 kilograms, prepared to be detonated with a remote control. 500 citizens who had been involved in the events in Syria and did not commit any act of killing against the Syrians were released. The authorities had set free thousands of people over the past months. The most recent was the releasing of 250 citizens. In a joint press conference with his Iranian counterpart, Ali Akbar Salehi, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov affirmed that words must be coupled with deeds in connection with the solution to the crisis in Syria and the success of Annan's plan. According to Mr. Lavrov, the two sides focused on the need to hold an international conference on Syria. In reply to Clinton's statements, Lavrov said all the agreements implemented with the Syrian side have to do with defensive equipment and weapons, whereas Washington sends weapons to armed men in Syria. Salehi said Iran's and Russia's viewpoints are close regarding the Syrian issue, adding that there are foreign sides that support the opposition, send arms to the militias, and obstruct reforms. The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry has strongly condemned the terrorist explosions that hit 4 cities in Iraq and left scores of citizens dead or wounded. More than 70 Iraqis were killed and more than 100 were injured following a series of attacks which hit different parts of Iraq.